I think the most dangerous substance abuse happening in your city right now might not actually be like in some dark alley somewhere.
Right.
It might be in a pristine corner office or a quiet university library driven by someone who is, simply trying to get through their Tuesday. That gritty movie scene of a life unraveling in a highly visible, dramatic way. I mean, that's just not the whole story anymore.
No, not at all.
We're dealing with a reality that is hidden in plain sight, deeply intertwined with our modern culture of hyperproductivity.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission today is to examine the actual landscape of stimulant use disorder, or SUD, and look at how a specific modern strategy for recovery is changing the way we treat it. Specifically, the telehealth model developed by Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC.
Yeah, and to really understand this, it requires a complete paradigm shift in how we view addiction. I mean, when you hear the word
Same.
stimulants, it's completely natural to immediately think of illicit substances, right?
Right. And like the hard stuff. Exactly. Cocaine, methamphetamine. And those are absolutely major components of this disorder. They devastate communities. But, and this is crucial, the data we're analyzing points to a massive, often overlooked parallel epidemic.
The prescription side of things.
Yes, so the misuse of prescription stimulants. We are talking about medications like Adderall, Ritalin, or Vivance.
Which, fundamentally changes the picture of who is actually struggling here. Because suddenly we aren't talking about someone chasing a euphoric high for a weekend party. We're talking about someone who just wants to study harder for their licensing exam.
Right.
Or someone who feels they have to work 14-hour days to get a promotion, or simply keep their head above water with the overwhelming demands of modern life. It starts out looking a whole lot like ambition, honestly.
Really?
It connects directly to the pressures you, the listener, probably feel on a regular basis to just produce more. Always more.
What's fascinating here is how seamlessly that celebrated ambition transitions into a recognized physiological medical condition.
Right.
Stimulant use disorder is not a moral failing. It's not a lack of willpower. It is defined by very specific, measurable diagnostic criteria. It happens when the initial intent to just, work a little harder gets hijacked by the drug's effect on the brain.
And the symptoms of that hijack are incredibly stark. Like, you start with the intent to take just one pill to power through a project, right? But you end up using much more than you originally planned.
Exactly.
Then come the intense cravings that you literally cannot ignore. And perhaps the most terrifying threshold, that moment when you look in the mirror, realize this is completely out of hand, actively try to stop, and find that you simply cannot.
Yeah, that loss of control is the clinical hallmark.
Yeah.
And to understand why stopping is so incredibly difficult, we have to look at the neurobiology. We have to look at what physically happens when a stimulant is introduced, and more importantly, what happens when it leaves the system.
Right, the brain chemistry side of it.
Exactly. Stimulants work by flooding the brain synapses with neurotransmitters, primarily dopamine and norepinephrine. These are basically your brain's focus and reward chemicals.
So it's essentially like taking out a high-interest payday loan on your own body's energy.
That's a great way to put it, actually.
Right. You are borrowing tomorrow's dopamine to get through today's deadline. You get the immediate influx of cash, or in this case, focus, but the biological bank always comes collecting. Eventually, that debt comes due.
And the penalties are severe. I mean, when you artificially flood the brain with dopamine, the brain attempts to protect itself by shutting down its own natural dopamine receptors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a process called downregulation. So when the stimulant wears off, you don't just return to your normal baseline. You are suddenly operating with a severely depleted supply of natural dopamine and fewer active receptors to even process whatever is left.
Okay, that brings up a question I think a lot of people might have right now. If someone is just taking a study pill, maybe they double their prescribed dose to get through finals week. Why is the come down treated so seriously? I mean, it's not like they're coming off a multi-day bender on illicit street drugs,
Yeah.
Why is the medical community so concerned about this specific penalty?
Because the biological mechanism is exactly the same, even if the intent was different. The medical toll of what we call the crash is brutal. We aren't talking about just being a little tired and needing a nap.
Right, it's way deeper than that.
Much deeper. We are talking about profound anhedonia, which is the inability to feel pleasure of any kind. We are looking at deep, crushing fatigue, where the simple act of getting out of bed feels physically impossible. The mood plummets to levels that can easily border on severe clinical depression.
Yeah, and our research also highlights physiological swings during this time, like massive surges in appetite and highly unsettling vivid dreams.
Those dreams are wild, yeah. They happen because the brain's sleep architecture has been utterly disrupted. Stimulants actively suppress REM sleep.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so when the drug is removed, the brain experiences what's called REM rebound. It's basically trying to cram all that missed dream state activity into one single night, which often manifests as really distressing nightmares. And beyond the immediate crash, we have to look at the quiet costs of chronic misuse.
Right, the slow, insidious erosion of your life.
Exactly. The chronic destruction of natural sleep cycles leads to a frayed autonomic nervous system. Personal relationships start to deteriorate because the individual is either artificially wired and hyper-focused or completely withdrawn, irritable, and exhausted.
It's like you're never just yourself anymore.
Precisely. And crucially, running the body's engine in the red zone indefinitely places immense strain on the cardiovascular system. You're risking long-term heart damage, alongside very severe mental health risks, like stimulant-induced anxiety or even psychosis.
Okay, so the payday loan has basically bankrupted the body. So logically, when you realize the extent of this physical and mental toll, you start looking for a pharmacological fix.
Naturally.
You go to a doctor and ask, hey, what is the medical antidote to fix this dopamine depletion? And here's where it gets really interesting.
It is arguably the most critical hurdle in treating this specific addiction, yeah.
Because there isn't a pill for this. Science hasn't given us a magic antidote to undo the pill.
No, hasn't.
If you're dealing with, say, an opioid use disorder, medicine has developed highly effective pharmacological treatments, like medications that bind to opioid receptors to stop cravings and ease withdrawal without the dangerous high. But for stimulant use disorder, there is currently no FDA-approved medication specifically designed to treat it.
Which is just a staggering reality for many patients to accept. I mean, you can't just block a dopamine receptor the way you block an opioid receptor.
Because dopamine is tied to everything, right?
Exactly. If you completely block dopamine, you strip away a person's ability to feel any joy, any motivation, or even initiate movement. It basically induces a state resembling Parkinson's disease. So without a pharmacological shortcut, behavioral therapy isn't just an optional supplement. It is the primary essential medical intervention.
That is a massive paradigm shift. We have a physiological crisis, but we essentially have to talk and rewire our way out of it rather than medicate our way out.
Yeah.
And our sources point to 3 highly specific, evidence-based therapeutic strategies to do exactly that.
Right, and the foundation of this approach almost always begins with cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Which people hear about a lot, but what does it actually mean here?
Good question. This isn't just sitting on a couch talking about your feelings. It's a highly structured process of identifying the exact triggers, the antecedent events that lead to the substance use.
So like mapping out the habit loop.
Exactly. Let's say a patient stares at a blank laptop screen, feels a huge wave of inadequacy, and their learned behavioral response is to reach for an Adderall. CBT intervenes at that exact moment of inadequacy. It teaches the patient to identify the distorted thought pattern and actively rewire their behavioral response to that specific stressor.
That makes total sense. But, I mean, knowing how to change and actually wanting to change are 2 completely different things, especially when the drug makes you feel so capable.
And that's exactly where the second strategy comes in, motivational interviewing.
Okay, unpack that one for me.
So motivational interviewing is brilliant because it directly addresses the psychological resistance. A traditional punitive approach, like a doctor wagging their finger and saying, you need to stop this right now, often causes a patient to just completely shut down.
Right, because nobody likes being lectured.
Exactly. Plus, this disorder is deeply steeped in shame. So motivational interviewing is more of a collaborative conversation. The therapist helps the individual explore their own ambivalence. People often desperately want to stop, but they are terrified of who they will be or how they will perform at work without the stimulant.
Right, they fear losing their edge.
Yes.
And motivational interviewing helps them realize their edge was always theirs, not the pills. I love that. But the third approach is the one that really blew my mind because it apparently has the strongest evidence base of all. Contingency management.
It truly is the most robust tool we have for stimulant use disorder.
Which is wild to me because at first glance, contingency management sounds almost like a positive reinforcement loyalty program.
It does, yeah.
It's like earning frequent flyer miles or coffee shop punch card points, but you are earning them for hitting tangible recovery goals. You give a negative drug screen, you get a tangible reward, a voucher, a gift card, a small prize. I admit when I first read about this, it sounded a bit like a bribe. Stay clean, get a gift card.
A lot of people have that exact reaction. It sounds overly simplistic, perhaps even transactional, until you understand the profound neurological logic beneath it.
Walk us through that logic.
Well, remember what we discussed about the brain's reward center? Stimulants hijack that system, setting an impossibly high bar for dopamine release. When the patient stops using normal life activities, eating a good meal, finishing a task, don't even register on their depleted dopamine scale. The brain literally feels starved.
Oh, wow. So contingency management actually speaks the brain's language.
Exactly. It provides an immediate, predictable, and highly salient reward. Earning that voucher creates a natural spike in dopamine. It bridges the neurochemical gap, providing a healthy alternative source of behavioral reinforcement right when the patient's internal motivation is at its absolute lowest due to the crash.
That is fascinating.
It actively trains the brain to associate positive feelings with recovery behaviors.
Okay, so we have the therapies. We know that CBT, motivational interviewing, and contingency management are the lifelines here. But wait, if the crash leaves you completely exhausted, bedridden, and battling anhedonia, how are you supposed to manage the logistics of actually getting to therapy?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. I mean, the friction of researching a specialist, calling to see who is taking new patients, battling traffic, and then sitting in a waiting room while feeling physically and mentally depleted, that just seems impossible to overcome in that state.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, logistical friction is exactly where addiction thrives and recovery dies. The best evidence-based therapy in the world is completely useless if the patient cannot access it during their most vulnerable window.
Which brings us to the solution.
Yes, this is precisely why the model presented by Coping and Healing Counseling CHC is such a vital blueprint for modern recovery. They have systematically dismantled those exact barriers.
And the scope of their operation is incredibly impressive based on our sources. We are looking at a practice that covers all 159 counties in the state of Georgia.
Which is an enormous and highly varied geographical footprint. I mean, you have densely populated urban centers in Atlanta where privacy and traffic are massive hurdles.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And then you have sprawling, underserved rural areas where the nearest specialized addiction clinic might be a 3-hour drive away.
But they bridge that gap because CHC is 100% telehealth. It is a fully PAPI-compliant virtual practice.
Right.
That means your privacy, your medical data, and your conversations are entirely secure, but you are doing this from the safety of your own couch. If you're going through that depressive crash we talked about, you don't have to put on a brave face for a crowded waiting room.
Exactly. Just log on.
And they back this up with a highly qualified team. They boast over 15 licensed therapists, and the specific credentials here really matter: LCSWs, LPCs, and LMFTs.
Yeah, let's break down why those credentials matter. We were talking about licensed clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, and licensed marriage and family therapists.
So they aren't just, life coaches.
No, not at all. These aren't just sympathetic listeners. They are clinicians trained to look at the entire system surrounding the patient. And crucially, the CHC team is deeply diverse and culturally competent.
Which feels especially important when we are talking about a disorder that is so often driven by cultural expectations of success.
Without a doubt. The pressure to succeed, the stigma surrounding addiction, and the systemic stressors that drive substance use, they manifest very differently across different cultural backgrounds.
Right.
So if a patient is trying to explain, say, the crushing weight of their family's expectations as a first-generation college student, having a culturally competent therapist who intuitively understands that context, it accelerates the trust in the therapeutic work exponentially.
It also means they aren't treating stimulant use disorder in a vacuum, which I think is key.
Yeah.
If you look at the specialties CHC offers, it's not just a narrow focus on the drug itself. They offer individual therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, and even teen therapy for ages 13 and up.
And there's a good reason for that, because addiction is a disease of isolation, but it damages the entire family unit.
Oh, for sure.
If stimulant use has caused someone to withdraw and fray their relationships, a clinician who is an LMFTT can bring the partner or family into the fold to rebuild that foundation. And if we look at the root causes, like why someone needed the stimulant to cope in the first place, we see CHC specializing in exactly those underlying issues.
Like anxiety and depression.
Exactly. Anxiety, depression, trauma, PTSD, grief, and chronic stress.
Because treating the substance use without addressing the unhealed trauma or the paralyzing anxiety, I mean, that's like putting a bucket under a leaky roof and never bothering to patch the actual hole.
Right.
Eventually, the bucket overflows again.
The clinical term for that is co-occurring disorders. You have to treat the SUD and the underlying mental health condition concurrently. A comprehensive telehealth model allows a patient to address the root and the symptom in the exact same safe space.
Now, I have to jump in here and address the elephant in the room.
Okay, let's hear it.
As we go through all of this, a very natural assumption arises. You hear about culturally competent, fully licensed clinicians available via telehealth in all 159 counties, treating both core trauma and addiction simultaneously.
Sounds expensive.
Right. It sounds fantastic, but the immediate thought is, private therapy like this is wildly expensive. This has to be some boutique luxury service that's completely out of reach for the average person.
It's a completely logical assumption, especially based on how broken the mental health care system can often be. However, the specific insurance data we have on the CHC model actively dismantles that financial barrier.
Which is huge.
It is. Their entire structure is built on accessibility. For individuals covered by Medicaid, there is literally a $0 copay for these sessions.
Wait, really? $0
Yeah.
to get evidence-based therapy?
Correct, 0. And they are broadly in network with major commercial insurance providers, too. We're looking at Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, and Humana.
Wow, okay.
Under those plans, the data shows session costs range from just $0 to $40.
I mean, $40 is less than what many professionals spend on coffee in a given week.
Exactly.
And frankly, it is significantly less than what an individual is likely spending out of pocket to illegally acquire the prescription stimulants they are misusing. CHC has effectively removed the financial excuse right alongside the geographical excuse.
Yeah, it creates a frictionless path. When the barrier to entry is just opening a laptop and the cost is negligible, the patient can actually focus their depleted energy entirely on the difficult work of recovery. Engaging in CBT, leaning into motivational interviewing, and participating in contingency management.
So, what does this all mean? When we step back and look at all the pieces we've explored today, the insidious, everyday reality of prescription misuse, the severe neurobiological crash, the realization that behavioral therapy is our primary medicine, and how telehealth models like CHC are delivering that care. What is the ultimate message?
Well,
First, we must emphasize that diagnosing and treating stimulant use disorder requires a licensed medical or clinical professional. We are unpacking the research today, but doing the work requires an actual guide.
absolutely. Self-diagnosis and isolation will only compound the problem.
But the undeniable takeaway from this deep dive is a message of profound, actionable hope. The brain is neuroplastic. It can physically and psychologically heal from the damage of stimulant.
It really can.
Recovery is a difficult road, but it is a well-mapped one, and it is entirely achievable with the right support system in place. Perhaps the most important thing to remember is that reaching out takes courage, not shame.
Because shame thrives in the dark. It convinces a person that they're weak because they couldn't handle their workload natively, or that their entire identity is tied to the productivity the drug provided. Breaking that silence is the first absolutely vital step in rewiring the brain.
And if you are listening to this right now and you recognize your own Tuesday in these descriptions, the intense cravings, the panic of trying to stop, the sheer exhaustion of the come down, or if you recognize these patterns in someone you love, you can take that courageous step today. The contact details for coping and healing counseling are right in front of us. You can explore their telehealth services online at chaiththerapy.com. You can reach out directly via email at support@chaiththerapy.com. Or you can pick up the phone and call them at 404-832-0102. I want to repeat that number because it could be the lifeline you need right now, 404-832-0102.
The clinical tools are established, the therapeutic strategies like contingency management and CBT are proven, and innovative models have finally made access realistic. But as we conclude our analysis, this leaves us with a lingering question to ponder one that goes beyond the clinical setting and asks us to examine the water we are all swimming in. We've seen how deeply this specific disorder is tied to the desire to achieve, to produce, and to constantly optimize ourselves.
Right. The culturally normalized pursuit of always doing more.
Precisely. If our modern culture constantly rewards working longer hours, pushing harder through exhaustion, and studying relentlessly at almost any cost to our well-being, how do we as a society begin to draw the line? Where does celebrated ambition end and the quiet hidden beginnings of a substance use disorder begin?